I want to thank you so much for taking your time for this, and I'm excited about your launch earlier this week. If you wouldn't mind just sharing kind of high level, what is Replicate all about?
In terms of the business, I think the origin story is quite an important component, right? So I was VP of client services and enablement at a company called SimilarWeb, just like web analytics, competitive intelligence type stuff. And the CS team, which I built from scratch, and it was quite a large function, taught customers how to use their product. And then I built the enablement team later on to teach SimilarWeb employees how to use the product, teach people, focus on value, all that good stuff. So I kind of it always worked around training in some way, shape, or form, whether that was external or internal. And this problem that I kept running into throughout, the last decade, but in particular the last 2 years since I was working in enablement, was this 90-day drop off. You would go and do something, train people on something, whatever it was, whether that was product, skills based, behavioral framework, anything. And you would see some adoption in the real world, typically not as much as you wanted, but some.
Right.
But after 90 days, it was like nothing had ever happened. And I was convinced, living in my own little bubble, right, that this was a similar web problem. And it was something to do with, I don't know, the culture of learning, and the business was growing really fast, and there was this kind of move fast and break things type mentality. And maybe we don't have time to refine what we're doing because we've got so many leads coming in, like all this kind of stuff. And I just kept trying to solve it in house, right? I never considered going elsewhere. And
Yeah.
and my mind was like blown that this is a problem everywhere. And that 90-day thing relates to some principle from a guy called Ebbinghaus and is seen everywhere in real life. So I felt that that problem needed to be solved, and was probably the biggest problem I'd seen in business in my whole career. So we started Replicate. So Replicate's goal, the best way to describe it, is to make sales training stick.
Okay.
And we do that in three ways, which we think are the three practical reasons behind that 90-day drop off. So the first is that reps don't practice. So practice in go to market means role play, right? And role plays are stale, they're awkward, but most importantly, whoever's playing the customer isn't an actual customer. So
Correct.
they can't pivot. They end up on these static, like, decision tree type processes, right? You can't build pain if the person that's playing the customer doesn't understand pain. The second is feedback, which is where we actually started at our business last year. So a manager doesn't actually have enough hours in the day to review enough work, to give enough feedback to make a meaningful impact on someone's quality of work, right? So the best managers in the business are doing, 30 minutes to an hour per rep per week. And if you actually look at the underlying geeky side, the maths, the compound interest of learning, all that kind of stuff, it's literally impossible because you're fighting that forgetting nature. And because it's so time consuming and subjective and hard to do, a lot of managers just don't do it at all. So the ones that are doing it well aren't actually making the impact that they could be. And then the last one is intelligence. And this is the one that probably like blows my mind the most, um, which is there's standard measurements of outcome. You know, if someone's hitting their revenue goals, if they're hitting their meeting goals, their retention goals, whatever it is. Then standard measurements for activity. You know if they have enough opportunities, if they're making enough dials. You even know if they're got the right talk ratio on a call or asking enough questions. But there's no measurement of work quality at all. There's no formal measurement of, are you actually saying the right stuff, getting the right response, and adapting well in a conversation. And when you think about it, that's the actual job. The actual job is, in this individual conversation, achieve objectives A, B, C, and D by doing it X, Y, Z way, right? So what Replicate does is we have these AI simulators that replace role plays completely in a much more engaging way. We completely automate feedback. So that's not coaching, it's feedback. So we'll review and scorecard and give kind of headline suggestions and tips of how to improve. And then we'll serve that to the manager so they know where to coach. And then we measure the whole thing across both practice and feedback. So you can actually see, is this person, let's take cold calls, is this individual or this team, firstly, are they any good at cold calls? If not, are they good at some areas and not others, right? So are they amazing at permission-based openers, for example, but they really struggle when they're talking about competitor X? And how is that trending over time? Like, are they getting worse and better at different attributes? And how can that inform our coaching strategy?
And I tend to agree that is the hardest part, and that's always a problem that I've experienced from being on the enablement side is that pushback from leadership and managers like, well, they don't have the time to listen to 10 phone calls a day for each one of their reps. And, and it's true. You don't have the quantity and you don't have the quality. And then the second part of that is you were talking about standard measurement when it comes to are they doing things correctly? I think the other side of that coin is the variability in what kind of feedback each individual manager would give along the way.
Mhm.
And I think that's a hard part, not the hard part. I think the hard
Yeah.
part is the repetition and the amount of times that you can continue to reinforce that skill through practice.
When I built the enablement function at SimilarWeb, like I thought I was building it my way. I thought it was my vision and my way of doing things, but I didn't realize until I looked back that I was building it the way that I had seen others, the market best practice, the stuff that influencers publish on LinkedIn. That was all informing my opinion, right?
Uh-huh.
And feedback's a really good example of this. Like you're a new manager in a business, you're given access to a tool like Gong or Chorus, which are amazing tools for reviewing calls, right? But they need to be a bit more targeted. So if you think about it, the process of feedback itself starts with sitting down and watching something that already happened. And
Right.
if you've got better concentration than me, you can watch that on 2x speed and keep up. But I can't. So if I'm reviewing a discovery call, that's 30 minutes. But for the first half an hour, I'm not actually doing anything. I'm just watching history, right? And
Yep.
then I'm gonna create this feedback and then I'm gonna give it to people. And that in itself is something like people don't question because it's just, of course, you have to review the thing in order to be able to comment on it. But when you phrase it like that, it sounds ridiculous.
Not only that,
And
it's the gap between the feedback and the performance too from the rep. So even if you have a wonder manager who can review 10 of my phone calls a week and give me feedback on it, it usually happens 3 or 4 days later, maybe five
yeah,
days later.
yeah.
And so it's not easy to make that connection to make a change and develop the skill that you want me to develop. Even though you're talking to me about it, it's still 4 days after the fact. So
And you
receiving
need
that
to
feedback
be,
immediately is a great way to also impart that importance of what the feedback is, and then
yeah.
coming back to it again with your manager who says, hey, I here's the collection of feedback, let's go over this category by category.
It goes the other way as well, which is a big problem that we're trying to solve. So you're absolutely right. The lag between execution and feedback is a problem, but there's an enormous problem when you think about this problem of knowledge retention and skill transference, right? From feedback, coaching, enablement, whatever medium it is, into the field, is then you get that feedback. So let's talk about an actual scenario, right? I really struggle on a cold call where I get beaten up by 10 different objections, and half of them I do a really bad job of managing. And I'm aware of that. So I give that call to my manager or I use something like replicate whatever it is to get some initial feedback on that call. So let's imagine the manager's amazing and they've sat down and they've stepped through one by one and they've coached and we've had a real discussion about it. And I've left thinking, that was amazing. That was awesome. I'm not going to end up in that situation again. Right.
Right.
Statistically, you think that 90 days thing, there's a second condition to that says, if you don't reinforce the thing you're being taught within 1 hour of being taught it, you forget half of it already. So unless that rep goes back onto calls and immediately ends up in an identical
Same
situation where
scenario.
they're caught in
Yeah.
the same objections, it might not happen for 2-3 weeks, at which point they can't remember the feedback. So and the point that we're making about time as well, like the manager can't go, right, now I've finished my one-to-one with you, now let me clear my schedule and do 3 role plays with you in a row so that this sticks. Like it's not feasible.
I tend to lean in that same camp too, because I mean, basically what you said is all the research that shows you have to put them back in a situation, but not only any situation, you have to put them back into a practice situation. So, James, even if I coached you about a specific skill and magically the next hour you are on a live call and you saw that same exact scenario, your brain is in performance mode, not practice mode. So your brain is going, what do I know?
Right.
How do I know how to do it? That's one of my largest pet peeves is when managers tell me, oh, my team gets enough practice. They're on live calls all day. Well, that's not
Yeah,
practice. That's them
it's like
scrambling for their lives and living up to the skill level that they've already developed.
the point you're making, I think, isn't a million miles away. Like when you're on a call with a client, you want to feel like you're operating on autopilot, like you're comfortable because you want to sound authentic, you want to sound
Yeah.
knowledgeable. So you have to really get to that level of comfort in a different environment in order for that transference. I hadn't thought about kind of framing it that way before. So yeah, very interesting. I'll go check out your post.
Is the next best step to show me exactly how we do that and
Yep.
replicate?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So let's look at that exact scenario of like I had a tricky call. So I'll come in here. Cool. Right. So this is replicate. And let's start in practice because that's where most of our conversation is kind of centered, right? So these are AI simulators that are voice based. So you have a real conversation with an AI, and that AI can be a representation of your average customer, can be an expert in a specific field, can be just obsessed with your competitor. Like you have full kind of control over what that is, and each one of these cards is effectively a different AI in a different scenario. Let's try the entertaining one, which is a CRO that really doesn't want to take a cold call. Um, and when I hit start, you should, if the audio is showing, you should hear a dial tone in a second. So can you hear that? Cool. So then
Hello,
I'll
Kate
play
speaking.
Hey Kate, this is a cold call. Want to have a fun little chat? See what she
Not
says.
interested. Bye.
So she's literally hung up on me. So it now says call ended, right? So you
Yep.
think about training for realism, you can have like a snarky simulator that's mean to you, but it's not realistic. Normally you have to get past, right? Whereas if I give it another go, and this is AI, so this might be highly embarrassing for me, but let's give it another go.
Hello, Kate speaking.
Hey Kate, this is James calling from Replicate. I know you weren't expecting my call, but can you give me 30 seconds to explain why we're here? So standard permission-based opener, but I
Sure,
didn't
you have
mention
30
value.
seconds. Make it quick.
Right? So you can see the make it quick, still the same person, effectively. I use that term lightly, but you have to do things the right way in order to progress. So you can have like a full end-to-end call, or you can focus on something specific. And for me personally, I find this more useful. So this simulator is set up as I'm an AE at Gong, meeting with an enablement director called Kate. Kate's been using Chorus and is obsessed with Chorus, was a Chorus customer from the beginning, right? And the AI has been trained on comparison pages of Chorus versus Gong and given this whole like persona and understands what a sales enablement director is. So this one's not a full call, it's just that targeted thing. So I gotta say, let's begin.
I love Chorus, been a customer since the
There we
start,
go.
and with the Zoom Info acquisition, it's only getting better. What can Gong do for me that Chorus
So if I say something
can't?
weak, like we're just way better than them. We take customers from them all the time. Those customers are really happy with us. You can go and read the testimonials on our website. Like we're just a better product. It shouldn't work because Kate is obsessed with Chorus. So this simulator is
I can
fantastic
understand why you
for,
might feel that way.
there we go, right?
But let me ask you this.
So if I come back over here now, if you think about this in a practical world, you have a rep that's really getting beaten up on competitor X objection. And if they
Right.
run a role play with their manager, it will be, hey, stick with that example, I'm using Chorus, why are you better? And it will follow 3 or 4 levels and then they'll be done. With AI, if you teach the AI to basically whatever you say, not let it go. So let's say you do say something interesting, she'll go, oh, that sounds unique, tell me more. And then we'll come back to, but I've been with them since the start. Every time you refresh that, it's a different experience, right? So it really helps you drill down and become spot on at that one particular thing. So you can do full calls or specific.
And how are we building these scenarios out from a company standpoint? So we just bought seats for Replicate. How do I build out these scenarios and these conversation intelligence scenarios as well? Or
Yeah, absolutely.
scenarios?
So you build the simulator in a different section of the platform, and it connects a customer side design to something that's on the back end that we control, right? So if you want to build a call simulator, you can just go, hey, new call simulator. I want it easy, medium, or hard, and I want it with the CRO. And then you do that, and it's connecting to like the basic prompt design and base model on our side. And then it asks you if you want to train it. And from that point, you can feed it calls that you've done with actual customers. So here's 10, 50, 100, 1,000 calls, whatever the number is, of real conversations that I had with actual prospects. And Kate will learn the style that your customers speak, but we'll also learn the base knowledge. So your value proposition, the people you're typically speaking to, where you do well, where you get stuck, what the objections are, like all of the knowledge across those calls, and make it basically the same as practicing with an actual customer, but without the risk, right? So that's how that side works, and you can do all of that in the UI. If you want something made that is custom, like I want an objection specific simulator that's trained on this article and all of these comparisons and that, like something like this, you would just tell us and we'd do it for you. But benefit of being a small startup, we can do that stuff very quickly. So it's a combination of service led and in-app, and over time, more and more of it will move to in-app. So where this really kind of comes together is the feedback side. So if we look at this as an example, I'll just move my window out of the way. So this is very hard tool. This is the same simulator that I showed at the start, and it connects to this scorecard that the customer has full control over. So you design this in a very simple scorecard looking part of the UI. So this is just a standard kind of cold call, and it gives you this really detailed feedback. So on the opener, which is meant to be permission-based, but also give value, it's giving feedback on that. On building curiosity with a strong, interesting hook at the start, gives feedback on that. And it will say, like, you scored this way because of this. Next time, instead of saying this, try saying this. So it's giving you at least one practical tip every single time. But where the real magic is if I scroll down, you see this. And these aren't simulators. These are actual calls. Obviously, this is a demo environment, but imagine, right, that these are actual calls that happen with real customers using the SalesLoft dialer that's integrated with our platform and pulled in. So you go and do your practice. We were talking about this earlier, to get comfortable. And then you take that new skill into the field where you're speaking to actual prospects. And you need to be continually evaluated on the same thing that you're trying to learn in order to wipe out that forgetting principle. So if I click into this, this is a very bad cold call that I, in theory, did, right? That ended with Kate being very mean to me and hanging up on me, right? And Kate is just because I have no imagination. This would be a real prospect, right? It wouldn't be the AI. And you end up with, the manager can see this, they can see the transcript, and they can see this. They can link through to Gong, Chorus, SalesLoft, Outreach, whatever it is, and go and listen to the actual call and give real feedback, and they can see the actual scorecard. So being held accountable on that same level, and also getting this feedback yourself as a rep, is really useful in bringing it to life. And then the last part of this that I'll show to you, just because we spoke about it at the start of the call, is imagine you do this, you sit down with your manager, you view this feedback, and you want to go again, right? And that scenario of, like, I'm not necessarily put straight back. So we can actually replicate this exact call. So here it goes, hey, is this Kate? And Kate goes, is this a cold call, right? So is that Kate? Sorry. So if I go over to practice and you see this, replicate call 3002.
Yep.
And again, it's AI.
That's pulled in from
so it's referring to two things. It's referring to the transcript of the actual call that happened with the customer, and it's referring to the base model trained on real client calls of, like, style and knowledge, right? What that means is, if I do the same thing, so let's see if it works. Again, a little temperamental sometimes, but.
Hello, Kate speaking.
Hey, is that Kate? Should say, if she does.
Is this a cold call?
There we go, right? So which is the same as the transcript we just saw. So if I follow and basically do the same thing with small variations, I'll end up in the same place. But if I refresh it, and we bear in mind the feedback said permission-based opener, and I'll go.
Hello, Kate speaking. Hello, Kate speaking.
Hey, Kate, this is James calling from Replicate. Do you have 30 seconds for me to tell you why I called?
Sure, but make it quick.
There we go.
I'm in the middle of something.
The key thing to kind of point out here is Kate is still the same person as that original call. So somebody doesn't like cold calls, they didn't want to take it.
Yeah.
But by incorporating the feedback, I've got a slightly different response. And if I continue the call, that tone will remain, but it will fall back to its base knowledge of how it was trained. So you can start to create these like pathways in someone's head between I struggled here, I got feedback, I gave it a go, I got a more positive response. And as you start to create that loop over and over and over again, people associate training with success in the field.
But if I'm a sales rep and I know I identified a call that I just got off and said, oh, I really struggle with that, how quickly can I go back in here? Like, how long does it take for that call to go back in to the system and generate that simulation as well?
So right now it's done on our side, so we can turn that around in like an hour or two, depending on time of day. By the end of February, it should be client facing. So seconds, we'll probably add a button to the calls that just says replicate this call and just does it automatically.
That's awesome. Okay. And then I see you've got a leaderboard up, because this is the other part that I'm really interested in is if I'm a sales manager or I'm an enablement manager, how do I go in and see the team overall?
So these so the core goal here is, as we said, was to establish a standard measurement of work quality. So the way to interpret these cards, if we look at fictional me, is I have an average score of 71%, right? And then that way that breaks down is cold call, again, the client has control over these models, you can do anything. But in this scenario, it's cold calls I'm 72 on, discovery calls I'm 49, and outbound emails I'm 80. And the way that's averaging up to 71 is I don't do as many discovery calls, right? What I care about is like, how is this trending over time, both in totality for it, is James getting better and better at what he's saying, and also, at an individual level, and even into that line item level of like openers, objection handling, and that kind of stuff. And across the whole team, is the team getting better and is their quality improving? Like, this shouldn't happen. You shouldn't have people suddenly start getting worse at what they're saying. It should either be flat or a steady incline.
Well,
And
if you had an influx
of
an onboarding group or new sales reps, you had 10 sales reps and now you have 17 sales reps, 7 of them onboarded at the same time, you might see that change. But I'm assuming that you could split out people if you needed to.
Exactly. Another really cool thing, and this is a feature that we literally released last week, is we know that tech stacks are complicated. Everyone's got 1,000 things to do. Vying for someone's attention is tricky. So the value here is obvious, but you still have to go and look, right? So where possible, we want to do things that are both seek and serve. So by seek, I mean, go to the dashboard, play around with the filters, look at the information, hunt for something interesting. But serve is letting us do the heavy lifting for you. So if I click over here to the Copilot and I say, hey, Kate, I have a one-to-one with James later. What should we talk about? Kate's sitting on top of everything James has done, all the feedback he's had, all the scoring he's had, both practice and in the field, and within seconds can give me a summary, right? So going into your coaching session or your one-to-one or whatever it is, right? Like, James needs to get much better on discovery calls, identifying needs, right? Like, it just takes all the guesswork out of it. And this, I think, is a big kind of future direction. We call it a Copilot, like a coaching Copilot or something like that.
Honestly, if I would even like that if it automatically sent me one, because it knew on Thursdays I had my one-on-ones with James, and Wednesday night I get the report and coaching tips for James put in there.
Some of our customers are actually using this to replace conventional spiffs. They agree with our narrative around outcomes versus activity versus quality, and the quality is the linchpin to unlocking the other two. So this shows you, and again, you can filter this by time range, model, and person, who's got the best cold call, outbound email, discovery call, whatever it is, in the company over this time range. And let's run a monthly, weekly, quarterly spiff for the best person there. And you could even give access to this to your like product marketing team, and they can go and view the call and see like what is the best call that's happening recently. What are they saying? How are they getting reactions from customers? And
I love the standardization of all of the skill, the feedback loop. I love that standardization, because that is a struggle that organizations have. Manager A says this, but manager B focuses on that, when it should be standardized, and the rubric should be, throughout that part of their organization. So if it's SDRs, they have their rubric. If it's account executives, they have their rubric. James, I appreciate so much the time that you took to show me and everybody this
It's my
replicate.
pleasure.
I think it's amazing. And then what's the best way for them to actually get their hands on this?
So we actually released quite a comprehensive free tool. So the cool simulator we showed right at the start, with particularly Mean Kate, who hung up on me, that's actually free. Anybody can use that. And it's trained on being a CRO as opposed to specifically understanding your individual business. So you can go over to our website, which is getreplicate.ai, sign up, and you're good to go. You've got that and a few other models as well. And if you're interested in custom training in your own business and getting access to all the analytics features that we looked at and the Copilot and integrating with tools like SalesLoft, then you can book a demo and speak to me directly through our website. It's all very clear from the homepage. Or add me on LinkedIn. Happy to talk to literally anybody that's interested about this problem or the solution. One or the other is fine.
So we'll getreplicate.ai. We'll get everybody over there to at least take a look at the core free version. Again, thanks, James. I really appreciate this.